All right, Jamila, hello. All right, let me try to bring you into the live. Okay, all right. Hopefully that will be a success. Yes, it is. Hello there.
Hello,
Uh,
hello. How are you doing?
I'm good. I was nervous at first. I feel like I had lost all ability to interact with people. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah. That's
I've
good.
had
You
a brief,
definitely.
yeah, I've had a brief period of rambling while I was waiting for you to join. So the edge is off.
All right. I'm here. I'm here.
All right. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good today. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this, so it's great to finally be here with you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it too. For the past 3 nights, I couldn't sleep properly because I was just like, hey, it's happening. But why am I nervous? You know, it's just talking to a peer, you know. So,
Right.
so how have your day in Germany been? What were you up to today?
Today, I actually haven't been doing much because yesterday was very, very intense, very emotional. So
Mhm.
today, I've tried to literally just gather myself and come down from the
Uh,
intense day, the
uh,
intense week actually that it's been. But yeah, I think we'll
oh,
get into it later.
oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I'd just like to bring people into the Blue Skhaftin with a little welcome that I have written over here. All right, so to welcome everyone to the Blue Skhaftin. In the beginning, there was a blue box traversing the vast emptiness. Eager to share, it exploded into infinite particles that became rocks, floating around a burning ball. Some of those particles would eventually become you and me, us. The Skaftin is creator and experience and a looming presence. That's why, in Waiting for Godot, Estragon says, we always find Skaftins, hey Didi, to give us the impression that we exist. And Vladimir responds, yes, yes, we're magicians. So, welcome to the Blue Stuff team. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome because I am joining you for the first time as well. This is the first in a series, or what I hope to be a series of interviews that I get to do with lovely creators such as Jamila, and I have the great opportunity to have Jamila as my first guest. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a great honor.
All right, like just off the bat, I'd like to know what is it that you do outside of poetry?
Hmm. Ooh. So I mean, my side hustle right now is working in a bar. You know, making people
Uh-huh.
drunk, being a bartender. Which is
Okay.
quite cool because you'd find some interesting stories when you like watch people all night,
Oh
especially
yeah.
when there's some liquor in the space. So that's what I do to like
Uh-huh.
make a living aside from like some other like I'm just trying to do some freelance work as well around like writing, translation, some editing as well. So, but yeah, just a bunch of things.
Uh, are there any interesting translation works that you've done in the past couple of months regarding the freelancing?
I have translated a piece by Edgar Allan Poe. Well, actually, it's just been a fragment of his work, and then there's been another author, Robert Bloch, I think, who has finished off this story because it was one of his last stories, I think, called The Lighthouse.
Uh-huh.
So I translated that into German. Also shortened it quite radically because it was very long.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so for the German speakers, that would be something that you might be interested in.
Well, since you're doing translation work, there was a conversation a couple of months ago where people were talking about, well, it was in particular about a white translator, I'm not sure if she was German, uh, but they they had to stop the process of translating because there was a conversation about you don't have the cultural know-how to translate works by black writers. What do you think about that? What is the importance of having a a cultural understanding? Well, maybe not understanding, but a cultural reference from the point of view of the person that you are translating. What is your perspective on that? What do you think is the importance there?
I think it's incredibly important. Hey, I mean, I think you're referring to the Amanda Gorman piece. I think
Ah,
that was
yes.
translated into like I think it was a Dutch translator, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, I did follow that thing, and I think also it actually in Germany it like sort of like had some ripple effects because now a lot of people, especially in the literature and translation industry, were speaking about like, oh, so what does this mean now? Like, can we not translate work of other people anymore? Like, what does this mean? And I feel like it's a very limited understanding. Because like I mean, we do all speak from a very specific point of view, and if you don't necessarily connect to that, I think I'm not sure if you can do that work properly. And of course,
Hmm.
then there are elements like research and actually also being really like familiar with the material, and also translating the craft as well, right? Because it's also something you
Uh,
can learn, you can find methods around. But I think I don't understand why we have this debate when there are literally a lot of skilled Black and of color translators that we can hire for these opportunities, and just
uh-huh.
keep coming back to like the way it's been done, which is a weird argument. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It really does become odd when the argument really lays on the side of, oh, are we not allowed to translate works anymore? It's a very limited perception of how
Mm.
they are looking in terms of what it means to be translating from a very specific cultural and social background. Yeah, so I also found it a very strange debate to be having. Yeah. How do you feel about translating the works of Poe?
Yeah, to be honest, I was a bit I wasn't too sure about that as well. But then since it was just this tiny fragment, and also since it was something that was offered to me and like it was just a paid opportunity, I was like, why not go with it? And also like you would find certain things that are like the way how gender was understood in these times, for example, or the way how certain descriptions were made that are then alluded to like a female character in the
Hmm.
story. You'd find a lot of like weird patriarchal understandings in there. And then I think what I try to do is like sort of like adjust that to our times and also to how I would like to read a piece like that, with like a sense
Uh-huh.
of what the dynamics might be. So I think there's also a chance in translating stuff, like in just like trying to bridge a gap between certain things that might have been normal back then,
Yeah.
but that we don't consider normal anymore. So we can adjust that, right? But it's tricky. It's tricky. I'm not gonna claim to have it all figured out. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I find that very, very interesting. I think as far as sitting down thinking about translations, I've never really thought about how there can be a change in terms of bringing it into the modern world, the world as it is right now. For instance, you're talking about, changing how they were talking about gender. And I feel like it is a very important step to take in terms of bringing literature to people, as you said, bridging the gap. Yeah.
Mm.
And since you've touched on gender, it is a very it is a very big part of the body of your work as a writer, and not just gender, but identity in general. How how is it? Well, not how is it, but what is the big thing about identity for you that you feel you need to express it in your work?
Hmm. I mean, I think it's the foundation that I'm standing on. In fact, the foundation that we all stand on, right?
Hmm.
And I think me trying to, or not trying to, but like actually one of the first and foremost things in my work is honesty. Like I can't really. That's also why it's interesting to link it to translation actually, because you're standing on someone else's ground and you got to like look into what they've actually been thinking and doing in their lives. But for
Hmm.
me personally, I think honesty, and honesty not just with others but also with yourself through
Hmm.
writing, through my work, is really something that is very important to me, and I couldn't really like, it's a constant process. It's also difficult sometimes because like you're being very confrontative with yourself in the first place. But I think it's what I'm writing from, the position and perspective that I come from and then go out into the world. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I've always found these debates around like people writing from someone else's point of view a bit weird because I can't really relate. Like I couldn't imagine, like, you know, just imagining myself to be this other person and then you write. Like, I mean, yeah, I'd always read back to me eventually because even if I'm writing about someone else, like I'd see it through my eyes, right? So I'm trying to link that. And yeah, so I think, I don't know, I think identity is also an interesting concept because sometimes we would be labeling certain things as identities, right? Or especially identity politics when it comes to like, yeah, these people are, you know, pushing for their agenda or whatever. And I'm just like, but isn't every kind of politics identity related in the end? There are just certain identities that we don't really like label or understand as, you know, subjective because they've been so normalized. They're like the universal standpoint. But I think, you know, and just like broadening that and understanding all of us to come from a very specific situated viewpoint, I think I think that's what I'm trying to do. And I think also that also opens up so many opportunities for people to connect with you and your work because sometimes we're similar than we think, right? Or sometimes I might speak about a particular perspective that you don't share, but you can relate it to another like experience that you've had through how I'm doing it, right? So I think there's a lot of a lot in that in relation to identity and how we can navigate them.
Yeah. Like you make a very important point in terms of how identities can't just be viewed as, you know, these individual nodes. They all interconnected somehow, and there is this, I don't want to call it a hyper identity, but maybe a human experience behind identity. And there's something interesting that you say. I know this is about writing, but I feel like it applies to even the identity in general. And that is, writing takes me through all the motions of human experience. And I feel like everything that you've just said is beautifully summarized in that one line. And it's really amazing because the difference is sometimes if we just sit down and talk to each other, we realize that, you know, we're more linked than we previously thought. Yeah, so that is a
as well, right? Like eventually, as much as writing is also like this very inward-looking process for me, eventually is also something that you can choose to put out there and to communicate and to like link up with other people and to gather around. I think that's where the magic lies for me also.
So now just thinking about you're of Iranian descent and you live in Germany and you have this big thing about contradictions that exist within the world that we live in. Can you talk about how you try to reconcile the differences of having Iranian descent and living in Germany, and how does that impact your everyday experience?
Yeah, actually, I would like to link this to what I said in the beginning about like how my day and my week was, because it really speaks to those contradictions, I think. So there was this racist terror attack that happened like 2 years ago. Yesterday was the second anniversary of it. And there was white supremacists who killed, I think, 9 people of color in a town called Hanau. And people, so what has been happening after that is that like I could see my environment responding so differently to this event. Like there would be people that are literally shaken to their core and finding this even now 2 years later, right? Yesterday was such a difficult day for me and for many of us. Like I'm having this event as a constant reminder that you're not safe in this country, or that you're not, that the institutions that are supposed to, you know, protect you are not always doing that if you are, you know, of the wrong of the wrong or the different background or whatever. And these things are so subtle because most of the victims of the terror attack have actually been, they had German citizenship, they spoke German, they lived here for their entire lives, right? And yet certain white supremacist understandings would deem that not German enough, to the extent that it's literally like killing people. So I think that for me and for many people of color in Germany has been really difficult to navigate, and really like seeing how other people would literally then like just celebrate some carnival that was happening yesterday as well, and you know, a bunch of other things, and not really understand the importance of these events for us, and for also the long-lasting consequences, because there's investigations happening, and there's a lot of like, you know, political stuff now, but it's basically a farce. Like nothing has really been changed in consequences. So seeing that and seeing all the failures that happened during that night of the attack and afterwards, is just really hard to deal with, and is, yeah, like it really does impact. But then on the other hand, I'm also, so I'm living in Berlin, right, which is like a very multicultural, so to say, city. So I know that like my experience, for example, would be a very different one if I was to live on the countryside somewhere. And also, of course, my experience is a very different one compared to someone who doesn't have the German citizenship, for example, right? Or who doesn't speak the language. So like this difference between like first generation migrants and second and third generation, I think is also a very important one. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like contradictory things, but we're trying to, you know, navigate around them and do the best of them.
I think another thing that when I was reading about the Hanau situation, as you mentioned it, which I imagine has made it even more difficult for people of color, is that the media's take on it was that it would speak about everything except the fact that it was about race. And earlier on, I saw a post of yours that said, quote the poet, right? And I want to know how you see the importance of the artist's role in terms of counteracting the media, where the media fails to send a clear message or actually speak clearly about the reality of situations like the Hanau massacre.
Yeah, I think so. That post actually was, it was one of the posters I was holding yesterday, and it quotes one of the victims, one of the people who died in the terror attack, who actually was a poet, and he wrote the sentence, "We are only dead when we're forgotten." Right. So I sort of like I and many others actually have used this line since then to actually remember him and to remember everybody who died, but also to link it to the importance of remembrance, and also the importance of what we remember, right? Because Germany is a very complicated relationship with commemoration and a hierarchy of sort of things that are being remembered and things that are not being remembered. Until now, we don't really learn about colonialism, German colonialism, in school. You know, it's something I barely knew anything about until I reached university, you know, and did my own like research. So it's really like, yeah, I think when it comes to poetry or to art in general, I do think it plays a really important role. But I also think it's, I mean, we are still building this poetry community over here, and I often look at South Africa with like a bit of jealousy to some extent, because I feel like as much as there are, you know, of course, like still a lot of struggles going on, there's a community, and that community is now being built, or is being extended into an industry. And I think in the German context, we're still very much trying to build the community in the first place. But also, of course, it's different in like German-speaking poetry communities and in English-speaking communities, and like, you know, the overlap that exists or doesn't really exist. So I do think, yeah, I think it definitely does play a crucial role. But we're still trying to figure out, or I'm personally still trying to figure out how exactly we can embark on that.
How is the poetry community in Germany? You speak about the differences between the English-speaking communities and the German-speaking communities. How is the poetry scene over there? I mean, when you look at South Africa, you have the spaces that are just performance spaces, and then you have the competitive spaces. What is it like in Germany in terms of the poetry industry and how little it is? Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think there's this divide of like formal poetry and like literature, like high class elite literature, which is something that people associate with poetry up to now. So you know, the old dead white poets that we learn about in school, basically, the Goethe, the Schiller, is like the ones that would then be, you know, like read by people in literature houses and whatever. But that is a very different culture from the poetry slam communities, which are often like also very English dominated, you know, or international, because I think it has been this like, you know, Americanized understanding of poetry, or like a trend that has come to us from like English speaking countries. So I think that is like the more lively part of it, I would say, like the, you know, your slams, your competitions, even your like open mics. But I still, I don't know, I sometimes find it difficult to perform in front of like German audiences, because I feel like they don't really respond to you. I feel like they're silent in the room. And like, you know, I remember the first time I got on stage here, actually, I was like, is it that bad, guys? Should I just leave? Like, it's fine. You know, like, I was so shocked by how like literally no one responded. But I got to understand now more and more that actually people do appreciate you when they're silent. Like that's actually because they understand like a snap or a, you know, something that they respond to you to be sort of like a disruption even. You know, they think like you'll forget your line, like something, I don't know. But so they'd rather keep quiet, you know, and then like maybe come up to you afterwards and tell you like, hey, listen, I really like this piece or whatever. But you know, so that was like one of the main differences that I really had to get used to, because like it sometimes feels like it's a very one-sided understanding of performance, because you don't really have the feeling that you actually have a conversation with people in the room and they give you something back, but it's more of like, okay, cool, I'm standing here on stage, you're listening, and then what, you know?
Yeah, I can imagine that to be quite difficult, and maybe even for performers coming from around the world to perform on German stages, they get there, they're like, culture shock. Why are they so quiet? Yeah, I can imagine how terrible that feeling is. And it's like, even with the evolution of poetry, thinking about how I used to think about it is that, okay, when somebody's performing poetry, you don't clap, you snap. You know, I'm just like, okay, wait, people are clapping. There's been a change. Okay, I can get used to this. I just can't imagine, you know, getting onto a stage where everybody is quiet. Yeah, because then it would definitely feel like, okay, my poem's trash. I'm out of here. You know.
I won't
So
say
yeah.
it was frightening at first, but like, yeah, you do get used to it to a weird extent. Yeah.
Well, now that we are on the topic of poetry, would you please share something with us and the people who are watching? What do you have for us?
I have a lot. I always have poems. Yeah, I thought I'll bring the very first piece that I did for the Word and Sound Slam, Gaps in the Wind.
Okay. All right.
My ancestors gave birth during earthquakes. Solid ground was never a family tradition. When the soil appears first in a volatile state, growing roots turns to a lifelong mission. We learned that repetition can help to remember. Repetition can help to remember, like inventing proverbs in the absence of prayers. Repetition can help to remember, to bend gravity a little bit, to mend the pattern of trembling water into a familiar theme. When home remains a foreign idea. When the crevice between belonging and longing stretches as enough to tear generations apart. My ancestors taught us to make art from contradictions. We learned to sing in tongues long lost in dark silence. Let memories unfold like water. Let daughters of salt disappear in the night. Let them search for lips to recognize their name, for smoke signals to arise from skin, for hot blood to drip into a map, a way to blend these fragmented gaps, while death only chuckles and points upwards instead. My ancestors are buried in the arms of wind, for air has not betrayed us yet, has not split open like soil, has not broken our heritage into pieces. We are in motion, still.
Oh, that still pierces. I think that is one of my favorite pieces. And I have the beginning of that poem written down here. My ancestors gave birth during earthquakes. So that first line is based on a true story. Can you please tell us about that?
Sure. So my grandfather, who was born in Tehran, in Iran, was actually born during an earthquake. Even though, like, well, there are a lot of myths around him as a person and his birth as well in the family. But one of the things that we know is that he was actually born during one of the strongest earthquakes in the region during the time. And we always sort of like attributed his restlessness, you know, and his like urge to move and never really settle down and always look for more and different things, and to also never really be happy actually, to that event, you know. And I mean, he was a very interesting character. He somehow managed to establish like 3 different birth dates and 3 different passports that he got.
Whoa.
So, you know,
Okay.
it's even difficult to trace that back. Like, okay, when was his actual birth date, and was it actually this earthquake? But it seems pretty much confirmed, as confirmed as it can be, that that did happen. So yeah, in this piece, I was just like trying to use that knowledge and to look at it and to understand, or to try to understand how it impacted myself, but also my family, you know, and like how the things, especially the things we do not speak about, and the things that are more subtle and less known, you know, how they actually inform us and our being. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's this, our ancestors taught us to make art out of contradictions. And I bring that into the conversation with the gender is but a haunted house. And we spoke about identity earlier, and you know, knowing that gender is important, but at the same time, it's just like this thing in the ether that shouldn't play a big role. Is the ancestors making telling you to make art out of contradictions something that speaks to gender being a haunted house?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Actually, I loved it so much that you brought these 2 lines together. Like when you told me about it a couple of days ago, I was like, bam, yes. Like it made sense, and I always knew that to some extent, but then to have someone to bring this to you in your own words, you know, with like your own work, it was I really liked that moment.
Yeah.
And connected these things. So for me, like, I mean, definitely, I think gender has, in so many societies and so many non-Western societies, been conceptualized so differently than we do today, right? Like, as in this binary, hierarchical type of thing where it's only men and women, and you can only be either or, and you can't be anywhere in between, and they're not flexible and changing, but they're these entities, right? So I think that in itself, it has been a European invention, or something that has been really not just like emerged from Europe, but also guided and legitimized to oppress other people, right? Because now they would use the argument that, like, oh, they're not civilized because they don't really have these two different, clear gender roles. Like their women don't even look like women, and their men do these things that our men don't do. So like Europeans really used gender as a colonizing force as well, and thereby also then like obviously impose their understanding of it, which now is so deeply ingrained in almost every society. So with regards to that, I think like I've tried to do a lot of research and like understand how gender roles in Iran have looked like. And it was an era, the Qajar era, like 300 years ago, roughly, where women, for example, were it wasn't just tolerated, but they were actually celebrated for their facial hair, like bushy eyebrows, like even the eyebrows that would connect here in the middle, a mustache, and like all these things that we ascribe with like masculinity today were totally natural with women, right? Or the category of a woman looked differently and was constructed differently. And there were various other gender categories that were not as binary as today. For example, like young beardless men, that were like understood as an own category in itself and as like a beauty ideal as well. So there was a lot more than today, a lot more fluidity, a lot more freedom, I guess. But I mean, I also don't want to romanticize these things because romanticize these things because I think often like we tend to do that when we don't know much, It's become this utopia back then. So yeah, I'm not saying that, but I think there was definitely things were not as rigid as in our society today. So I think when it comes to these contradictions that I'm feeling and I'm navigating around in terms of different aspects of the same identity, I think that's also one of the things that I've been trying to look into, like, how did my identity, my gender, and also like these other things that inform me, how could they have looked like? How different they've been, and what do I do with it now, right? So, yeah.
And at what point in your life did you feel like, what, this is the time I want to unbox myself from, these binaries that exist, the binary that exists? At what point do you feel like you want to unbundle yourself and just take yourself out of that?
I mean, I think deep down inside, like always, I think it's something I think many children, like I'm watching my young brothers now and I'm just looking at them and see how freely they move, and behave. And I think no child is born into this like men, women type of categories, but then we are taught them, right? So I think for me, it was more of like, in the recent years, starting to understand or realizing how uncomfortable I was around these categories, and then looking back at my childhood and at my teenage years and just realizing so many things, so many things that made sense now. Like, the fact that I always loved to like wear, I hated going shopping, but if I did, my mother took me, I would go to the men's section right away, right? Or to the boys section. And I would always play soccer with all the guys, and I never saw it to be a thing, right? Because I felt myself fitting in. Actually good. Like I beat the shit out of all of them. But so I think these things, we sort of like retrieving them and understanding them in like retrospective is something I've been doing recently, but it's been always there. I think it's really been there.
That brings me to something, a poem that you wrote for Poetry Potion. I'm not sure which prompt it was for, but with everything that you're saying now, it brings me back to this. The poem that you wrote is called Circular Movement. Do you remember it? So it goes.
If I could, please read it for me. Yeah.
It goes, maybe the key to being free is running in circles so that society cannot corner me. That is it. Simple and short and very impactful. So do you remember writing that?
I do. I actually do. I think it must have been 2018, 2019.
Yeah, 2019.
In South Africa, actually, yeah. I don't remember the prompt though, but yeah, it was a nice, cute little poem.
Uh, when did you first go to South Africa? Because before, when I was still planning the interview, I thought you were in South Africa, and then I was like, wait, you're back in Germany. When did you come to South Africa? And before that, you were in Ghana. So what was the progression? What was your timeline from Germany to Africa back to Germany?
You did your research, hey? I just want to say, like, you're really wow. Yeah, so I did this. It was like a voluntary gap year type of thing in Ghana in I think 2014, 15. Something I'm absolutely not proud of anymore today, and I wouldn't do anymore. But you know, back then it's been this thing with like, oh yeah, you graduated from high school, and you know you don't want to go straight to university or do something right away. So it's been something that like an option that's been there, and I mean I'm it was an experience that like definitely brought me a lot of in-depth knowledge and understanding, and you know, so I wouldn't want to miss that. But I think the whole thing of like just Europeans just going to some African country after high school without any knowledge or anything, but just like going there, doing whatever they do for a year is deeply problematic. But yeah, you know, back then that's what I did, and then I started to study in Berlin in 2016, and then after 1 year worked for like a while in Cape Town with a political magazine called Amandla.
Yes.
And do you know them?
Yes, I actually started researching Amanda after I saw an article that you wrote. It was an interview with One Love. Yeah, and that actually brought me to a lot of the questions that I had about identity, because I even saw that in the way that you structure your questions and the conversation that you create, it was very heavy on identity. And that was mostly the basis of coming into wanting to speak about identity with you. So yeah, I am familiar with Amanda now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Also, people must check out One Love. He's like this amazing artist from Ghana who's just doing. He's incredibly creative on so many levels. But I can just recommend checking out his music, his work. But yeah, so I worked with them in Cape Town for a while. I then had to sort of like continue my studies, otherwise I would have dropped out. But then I decided I tried to shift them to Joburg. So I studied at Wits for like almost 2 years, I think. And then just returned to Germany right before COVID hit, actually, to finish my degree, to write my thesis. And then that was it. So, yeah.
How was it working on your thesis during the times of COVID?
I mean, I don't know. I've always been this person who just does things very last minute and very, very like, you know, I function under that pressure very well, actually, too well. So I sort of like, I think I didn't really do I wrote a proposal and I did some presentation somewhere, but eventually, like, I wrote the thesis in like a week. Like the last week, didn't do anything else, didn't sleep, like just wrote. So yeah, I guess that could have been better in terms of the time management, but I think COVID also taught me to literally like work from anywhere. You know, then like the home office, the job that I did afterwards was like also mainly home office. So just like, you know, creating your own space, but then also like being disciplined enough to actually sit down and do things and not having these excuses of like, oh, you better go to a library or you have to go to an office or whatever. No, like you can do it from home. Yeah, definitely.
And one of the things that came out, I think, I don't want to call it a positive, but like one of the good things that did happen is that there was a digital slam, the Word and Sound digital slam, which you participated in. What was your mind space like going into the slam? Was it something that you wanted? Did you want to compete, or were you just like, hey, let me just have at it so I can keep my creative juices flowing?
Mm. I mean, so I sort of like followed and watched the Digital Slam the year before. I guess that was
Hmm.
2020. And I think I entered like in the last month or something, but just, just because people had been like asking me, like, where are you in this whole thing? You should enter. And I really, I mean, I just loved what, what was created with it, right? Like
Hmm.
the development from like, just like standing on the stage and presenting your pieces into like the whole digital realm and like how does performance now look like, in
Hmm.
terms of that. So yeah, I was really excited to join actually. And
Yeah.
it's been one thing that's been like getting me through the year to an extent, because you have
Hmm.
this thing every month that you look forward to, but you also struggle with immensely. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you have any low points during your preparation for some of the poems?
Hmm. No points. I mean, definitely many crises along
Uh-huh.
the way. Um, Moments where you feel like, I think maybe if you want to call it a low point, maybe the very last video for the finale, actually, it
Hmm.
was such a messy process, like all of it. Because initially I wanted to write an entirely different piece.
Uh-huh.
Actually, it speaks to what we spoke about before, in terms of, I think I wanted to like tie everything together that I had sort of like touched on in relation to gender, in relation to identity and my background, and to bring this together to actually speak about what I spoke about before, like the fluidity of gender roles in Iran, like
Hmm.
300 years ago. And I literally, for like weeks, I tried to write this piece, and it didn't bring me anywhere. And I was just like, it got so frustrating. And I remember someone telling me, like, I spoke about that process, and they were saying like, listen, I think you're trying to write a thesis here. You're
Uh-huh.
trying to write a 2 minutes poem. You're trying to write a thesis here. Maybe it's not the thing. And for the longest time, I didn't want to believe that. I was like, no, it can come together. I know it could. But
Hmm.
eventually, I think a week before the submission, I was just like, I can't. Like, I have to do something else. So
Hmm.
I branched into like, I had a couple of lines written from this moment where I felt very frustrated and like triggered by something, and then I just used that as a foundation and built a piece around it. But then
Yeah.
also the whole shooting, like the recording and the shooting process was really messy because like so many things went wrong. And
Uh-huh.
I had gotten the smoke machine right from
Uh-huh.
someone, and I used it, but I didn't really realize that like each time I'm using it for every take, I'd have to take a break and then air out
Ah.
the entire room so that the smoke is gone again and I
Oh.
can.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like at 5 a.m. in the morning, extremely cold outside. I had to open the
Hmm.
windows for 5 minutes after every take that I did. And at one point I was just shivering, standing there.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
that could have been a good point. Yeah, but I hope it's not too obvious in the end result.
Definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, the beauty of art sometimes is in the process and how messy it is, and then you have this beautiful product at the end. And just before we go on, Muhao Muso or Muhao Muso is asking, what were your majors and what degree did you obtain?
Mm. So I
Mhm.
studied political science, but then branched into sociology as much as I could, actually.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, I realized that that's actually where my interests lie, more
Mhm.
than in institutional things. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, so a combination of these two things.
All right, all right. I think with me, it's quite well, not quite the opposite. I just failed sociology.
Oh.
Um, yeah, I failed sociology, and weird thing is, I did great with politics, and my headspace a lot of the time was in politics, but I ended up doing music journalism.
Hmm.
So hey, yeah, for the love of art, as Nguli has said over there in the comments. So I just want to go back to the messiness of the process. So I understand that you were a director because there was the skit you did back in Ghana called Africa. I'd like you to tell me about that first before I ask you the next question.
Yeah, digging out the dirty laundry here. But okay. So it was just this idea that I had with a couple of friends in Ghana, because we sort of realized how many Europeans that came to Ghana would perceive uh, the whole place and their experience and the ease with which they could travel there, right? Like you literally like didn't do shit in your life, but you can just like come to this country and I don't know, do whatever you want to do, just for the fact that the citizenship and the privilege that comes with it. So we were trying to like show or reveal some of these stereotypes and understandings that people have of Africa as a country, right? And all the things that they associate with it, like poverty and diseases and whatever, to reveal that, flip it around, and to have like, you know, to show like a different side of it. I don't think it's really well done. I think it's literally been one of the first things I've been putting out there. And it's just like an idea we ran with and decided to do. But yeah, that was the idea.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts somewhere. It all starts somewhere. And like, it was really great to watch. Like, it felt very old school. It was like, okay, hey, here's a thing, let's do it. And I think the end result, even how it was shot, the dialogue is just like, okay, here we are, learning about these stereotypical things that Europeans have in their heads when they come to Africa. And I think drawing on the experience part of it, how how people experience things in their heads, and that was a motif that you explored. I'd just like to come to making your videos, right? Because in making your videos, there's this interesting thing about reflection and what is the other word? Okay, I wrote this down as observing and experiencing yourself as a complex entity through multiple identities and mirrors. So double exposures, the use of double exposure and the use of mirrors in your work, or the idea of a mirror image. Is that intentional? Is there a story there? Or is it just something you feel like, okay, as an artistic choice, I am going to run with this?
Thinking now, I think I can recall 2 pieces where I used mirrors in the videos. I'm not sure if there are more. If there are more, they were like they're escaping now. But I think, I mean, I think it speaks to the reflection that happens when I'm writing, and also throughout the entire process, right? Where you like, as you say, like these multifaceted elements of your identity, and then you're confronting yourself with some of them, you know, or you're putting them together, you're putting them out there as well. So I think there's that in terms of like how I would like try to use, or maybe, but also I think with the video, it's always like tricky because you have to think differently in terms of how do you bring your message across, like because like people would watch it and they listen to what you say, they have the content, they have the audio element of it, right? So like a soundtrack or whatever goes on there in the background, and then they have the video as well. So I think that is really like a lot to digest when you look at it once, you know, when you like actually just, and to be honest, I think also like I'm not making these videos for people to look to
I think I'm losing you on the audio a little bit.
yeah. Oh, sorry, I think it's because I've been getting a call. Can you hear me again?
Yes, I can.
Let me see, you're a bit I can't really hear you too well now, but
Can you hear me better now?
it's a bit muffled, but I guess that's my phone because it's been getting this call. Let's see. I might, yeah.
Okay.
For now, it's fine.
All right.
Yeah. So I think in terms of the things that happen in the video, like there's a lot, you know, on the different levels of things that you're communicating, the audio, the video, the content itself. And I think what I've been trying is to like find a different way of expressing the thing that I'm saying in the words, but then find a visual language for it, right? So yeah, and then I think it just depends a lot on the particular piece and what the content speaks to, and what concepts I would come up with to then determine like what I'm doing in the video.
I think like looking at your videos, because if you're watching them back to back, because it's not like the exclusive use of mirrors. It's just even the way you put yourself in the frame when you have two of you look
Oh
side
yeah.
by side. Yeah, I feel like watching the videos. If you just watch the videos alone without the audio, you'll see there's like a story over there, about reflecting and also, about experiencing the world as this this duality of a being or multifaceted being. So that was very interesting and a nice touch, I think, even if it maybe sometimes isn't intentional to tell that story, but there's an overarching story within the videos themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And I'd also like to say, I think personally, like I prefer pieces of art, whether it's poetry, videos, or other type of performances or whatever else that I can like consume or like watch or read multiple times and find
mhm,
something else in them every time, because they're so multi-layered and because there's so much
mhm,
in them. I think those are my favorite works of art, where like
yeah,
I'm watching something for the 50th time, literally, and I'm like, shit, I didn't
that's
see this
yeah,
before. Like it's just blowing your mind. So I think
yeah.
I'm also hoping that maybe that is an experience that people could have when they go back to it, and they would find
Mhm,
something else that they didn't see before.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something that is there within in your work. Masterpieces that have been made. And upon rewatching, it's always interesting, because the one time you're listening to the audio, and then the other time you're like, okay, what are the elements in the background? So it's been an amazing experience listening and also listening to your work and also reading your work, because sometimes there's you read the work first and then you hear it and it's like, okay, there's emotions that I read which are then being multiplied when you're hearing the piece, like actually getting another physical element to the piece itself. So that was really great. And being on that, would you please bless us with another poem?
Of course, I would.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. I'm gonna do What is Gender but a Haunted House.
Oh,
Just for the sake of it, because we spoke to it a lot now.
all right.
So
Good.
I was brought up in a haunted house that pretended to be a home. There's a room in my memory that reeks of unburned ashes, with ghosts of men disguised by white walls, with screaming smoke but unnoticed sparks. The past burns most of my futures here. There's a window in the entrance of history that presents a broken vision, a double blind view, just pink and blue curtains hung on two sides. The gaze of hardened colors petrifies my fluidity here. There's a door to my sanity that creaks every time the darkness breathes. Its edges scratch at the resistance of light, a tired sun consumed by patriarchal gloom. My fears gather like unhinged clouds here. The horizon roars, and all my doubts are compressed to one question. Why have I tried to cleanse this place for so long when this house will always be haunted? My body outgrew this curse long before its birth. This place was meant to be nothing but hollow. I'm beginning to see through its emptiness now. My vision contains more than a view. So I turn the doormat around and summon the witches. We burn a bush and burn a few bridges, leave ashes like breadcrumbs and trust the winds to disperse the fears and plant something fertile. Learn to break hardened habits like a prism breaks rays. Stay if you want, leave if you like, but never dim your light in the face of this blaze. And stop being afraid to abandon a house never built to be home for us anyway.
Mm.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Like I want to say it's a lovely poem, but then at the same time, like it's one that speaks to the soul. You know how torn you get sometimes when somebody recites a painful piece, but it's very lovely to hear.
Mm.
That's the feeling that I have with that poem. Ah, wow. Thank you very much for that. All right,
I
I
know that
hope.
feeling very well, and I think I don't know, it might feel like a contradiction, but I think it's one of those contradictions that we can embrace because in the end,
Uh-huh.
that's also why we do this thing, right? To make something beautiful of something painful.
Definitely, definitely. And I'd just like to go now to, well, the freestyle, freestyle segment.
Hmm.
Um, so just before we close it all off, you did speak about what had your attention this week. Can you just talk about it briefly and then give us the poem that you wrote?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. We can continue from where we were, speaking about what caught your eye. So this is the segment where I have asked Jamila to write a piece about what caught what caught their attention this week. I am really sorry about that. What caught their attention this week? So let's hear what you've got.
Hmm. Cool. Do you want me to go into the piece first and then we speak about it, or should I give some context and then?
Some context first, and then we'll go into
Okay.
the poem. Yeah.
Right. I think I've given most of the context already,
Uh-huh.
because the piece I wrote is about the racist terror attack that happened 2 years ago in a German town called Hana.
Mhm.
So it's basically just like me like revisiting all these things that happened, all the statements of the families of the deceased and the survivors, and sometimes also like what really got to me most, I think, were like the little details where people would
Mhm.
share things that happened to them during that night. How the police treated them. There was one of the survivors whose brother actually passed away, and he got shot twice, and he with a bleeding wound on his throat, where the bullet was actually at, was approaching a police officer and asking him, could you like help me, could you like call an ambulance or something. And the police
Mhm.
officer literally asked him for his ID first, which is
Whoa.
insane if you look at like the fact that racial profiling doesn't even stop when someone is literally bleeding.
Yeah.
So things like these, or like many other things that were just like with me, like on my mind or on my chest, for most of this week. And then I sort of like, I literally wrote this piece like last night after
Mhm.
the protest and the commemoration that happened. And yeah, it's still very fresh,
Mhm.
in that regard. Like I don't think it's fully polished yet. It's what I got.
Yeah. All
Yeah, and I'll
right.
have to read it because I didn't memorize it yet.
Ah, yes. The words have a different energy when you're reading them from the page.
They
Yeah.
do, they really do. I'm usually trying to memorize it, but yeah, here
All
we
right.
go. We are only dead when forgotten, you said. Remembering you means changing what killed you. 18 eyes shut by the wrong color, failures too familiar to be accidents, victims still mistaken for threats, yet safe enough to be hiding behind. Oh, how easily all these blue shadows blended into brown horizons that night. No respect for the deceased, but least for the living. How do you mourn in safety here while living with a wound that always bleeds? Once our mouths have dried up from grief, anger now blossoms between teeth. Strides pave the streets with rage. Truth travels through veins of this city. We are only dead when forgotten, you said. So we call for the change that echoes in your names. Yeah.
Wow. That is heavy and very powerful, and reflects very much what you were speaking about earlier in terms of how the police don't really care even when you are literally dying. Wow, that was
Mm.
heavy. Uh, that was very heavy
Yeah.
and very, very beautiful to capture the moment. And as you're saying in the quote, we are only dead when we are forgotten. And this is, one of those steps to always remembering. And you do say, what is it? I've forgotten. Repetition is the key to remembering. And I think the commemorations as the years go on will aid in that remembrance of, the nine who were massacred. Um, yeah, so thank you very much for that.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I mean, I think also, so one of the things that the families and the communities that have been, advocating for change and literally mobilizing, have been saying is that to remember means to change. Like you can't just remember people, with this hollow, like once a year get together, some politicians showing up and putting down
Yeah.
flowers, but you gotta change something, if you're
Hmm.
serious about the remembrance.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I just like I try to pick up certain things. For example, the fact that like yesterday when there was this protest happening, at the same time there was like a couple of right extremist Nazi groups also mobilizing,
Hmm.
trying to occupy the same area, and literally like the place where the protest would have started or was starting, they would also gather
Hmm.
there and just like disrupt or whatever. So the
Hmm.
fact that we can't mourn in safety because people are still disrupting even the space of commemoration, and also the fact that the police obviously protects them because they understand migrant communities to be this perpetual threat,
Hmm.
that they see. And also the fact that the police itself has so many like connections to right wing, ideologies and
Hmm.
practices in the German state. Like there have been a lot of things being revealed during the past years, and so
Hmm.
all of these things are just like, yeah, yeah, we can't really mourn in safety, but we're here.
Yeah. And there's when I was reading, there's this thing that they were talking about that um, somebody said that even if there are well, not right wing, but even if there are right wing police, the saying in Germany goes that one eye must always be blind. And
Mm.
I feel like it's a very big contradiction, and expecting a person who has these set ideologies that, immigrant communities are a threat, can't really be blind because their prejudice will always be present with them, even with the one eye closed. Even with the blind eye, yeah, they'll
What
constantly
they
have the
say,
prejudice. Hmm.
what they even say is that like the right eye is blind, right? So they
Uh-huh.
would they would target and they would look at like left wing activists and migrant communities and all of these people, but then when it comes to right wing ideologies within their own spaces or also anywhere else, that's where they're blind.
Uh-huh.
Which is actually pretty true.
Hmm.
It's the reality. And
All right, that adds a lot of context to now the saying when I was reading it. That adds a lot of context to it, and thank you for that. It's been very educational.
sure. So what did
Yeah.
you bring for us? I'm curious.
Um, I don't
Here
know.
to
Like
hear.
after after what you've just brought for us, I'm very nervous about this. Because like it's okay. So I think it's called Who's Fooling Who, and I wrote this 2 days ago, just thinking about a situation that happened on Facebook when I was trolling, and it emerged that somebody had stolen somebody's jersey, and there was Terry Pratchett involved. So, in the case of Quaz versus Flo, this is who's fooling who. All
Okay.
right, so this goes. These are the receipts of deceit from a thief who stole the fruits of a rooted mother's mustard seeds. They are assumed to comfort a reject of the streets. The other's eyes flow in perfidy when he turns a page to read. At the seams, this just seems like a Spider-Man meme. It seems it's a phalange derby, but the winner here is Terry. Pratchett in a mustard jersey. And that is the end. Yeah, so that's what I had to bring. So the whole situation was just very funny to me because, knowing how Quaz and Flo are just a great comedy act together. That whole situation, I felt like it needed to be aired out, and there they were airing it out, and we found out that, the jersey was comforting Flo in winter, and um, Quaz can also have receipts to Terry Pratchett. It doesn't really mean anything if Flo is claiming that Quaz stole the books. So yeah, I brought Who's Fooling Who.
I mean, now the big question is, where is the jersey?
Yeah, like we need to find out. That's what we still don't know.
Yeah,
We don't know where the mustard jersey is. Yeah. Jamila, thank you very much for joining me on this odyssey and this conversation that we've been having. It's been a really great pleasure having you be my first guest. So yeah, thank you very much. Before we move, are there any projects that you're working on? Anything you'd like us to check out?
Yes, so for my Berlin people, I can plug an event that's happening on Friday. It's called Poetry Meet. I think it's a series, and they have like Poetry Meet Hip Hop, Poetry Meet Soul. I think the theme on Friday will be Black Love in regard to Black History Month. So that's going to be happening, and I think I'll be performing at the like open mic sections after the actual show, which I'm looking forward to. And then there'll be a slam on the 5th of March. Where I'll be participating. The theme is passion. So we'll see how passionate the night will be. But,
Yeah.
It'll be me and a bunch of other really cool performers. So people in Berlin, do join us. And otherwise, for any other bigger or smaller projects, just watch out what you'll hear from me here.
All right. We'll keep our eye on your social media. I hope you have fun at the sessions. Also have fun at the slam.
Thank you.
Yeah. So on my side, with announcements, there is Tembisa Theatre Week, that is starting on the 28th, starting on the 25th, if I'm not mistaken. And two of our beloved poets, will be staging their productions there. So we have Le Rulama Shomolo by Jonathan Lifenya, and that piece is directed by Masai. Very sad that I won't get to watch. This is history in the making, important pieces of literature. So that's being staged twice, on the 28th of February and the 1st of March at 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. respectively. And then on the 2nd and the 3rd of March, we have Sinking by Soli Ramazwi, and that'll be at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. respectively. So if you are in the south of Africa, be sure to check out Tembisa Theatre Week. I mean, it's bound to be great. We have legends that are performing over there. Yeah.
I think plays will at one point also be, available in the virtual space or whatever. But I also love this work.
Yeah, it would be great to witness this. It would be really great. Thank you very much. This concludes our Skhaftin Shandis. So, just quickly, if you had to make a sandwich out of your favorite poets, who would you have?
Wow. How many people can I squeeze in the sandwich?
As many as you like.
Ooh. This will be an ending in that case.
Okay, let's make it look like this. So you have the bottom slice, right? Mm-hmm. You have lettuce, you have cheese, and what else? Tomato, and the tomato. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, plus the top slice. So that's 5.
Okay. All right. So we have
Yeah.
5 slices. Okay. Let me see. Well, I'll have to start with Audre Lorde, just there at the foundation, you know. Who would I then put next? Let me say Azita Khareman. She's an Iranian poet, a contemporary Iranian poet. Unfortunately, I can't read the Iranian original yet. Hopefully one day. But there are some English translations out there, and yeah, people should check it out. It's really really good work. So then, who else do we put in there? Well, I have to go with Belita Andre, who's one of my faves, and also someone who taught me a lot about performance, you know, and how to like conduct yourself on the stage. Let's see. I mean, I'm a big fan of Trabiso as well. Like just watching what he's been doing for the whole digital slam in itself, you know, I think is very legendary, and really helped us to carve that space. And now the final poet. That's hard. That's hard. You know what? Of course. How could I not mention her? I'll go with Hope Nechibambe.
All right. Okay.
Theater play as well. I think last week. In the State Theater in Pretoria.
Yes.
Great. I'm a huge fan of her work.
So there we have your sandwich of poets. All right. Thank you very much. It's been very lovely having you. And I hope we speak more. And I get to see more of your projects.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege to be on this platform, to open up this, the thing that will hopefully branch into a whole series of conversations with poets. So I'm looking out for more.
All right. Thank you very much. And to those who are watching, we have been in the Skhaftin with Dshamilja Roshani. This is the end of the interview. Thank you for watching. Have yourself a good night, a good afternoon, and a good morning, depending on where you are in the world. All right. Thank you very much. And good night from me.
Good night.